Today we're going all the way back to 2006 to take a look at the original Just Cause. While it may look somewhat unimpressive today, it was no doubt a blast when it released almost 18 years ago. And unlike its massively praised follow-up, it has a bunch of hidden content in its files that has remained unseen for all these years, and that can actually be loaded into the game. So join me today on the exciting tour through Just Cause's unused and cancelled content. So why don't we start with the main man, Rico Rodriguez himself. There's an alternate or beta version of him left in the files that is never seen in the game. Instead of his usual shirt, he's wearing a t-shirt, gloves, and a vest with flames on it. But more importantly, for whatever reason, he looks like Michael Jackson. I'm actually not entirely sure what this model even is. It could be a beta version of Rico, or perhaps a mission-specific outfit for a cut mission, or maybe just an alternate skin you could have equipped. This model can be found in a folder called KC002, whereas regular Rico is KC001. It definitely is a Rico model, however, since there is another model in this folder named Rico Skysuit. That's right, you thought the Wingsuit was a Just Cause 3 invention? Well, think again. This is what the model and its texture looks like, and it's no doubt meant to represent a Wingsuit, albeit a more realistic one than the ones in JC3 and 4. It's fairly simple looking, and I doubt it ever got far in development, although I kind of wish it would have. Exploring the game with the Wingsuit would have been amazing, plus we would have also gotten it in Just Cause 2, though it was probably shelved because there is no good way to quickly get into the air to use it, which makes the mission-specific skin or gear assumption from earlier a more likely scenario. Avalanche shared this screenshot a while ago, which is to date the earliest image we have of the entire game series. Rico looks completely different, and so does the entire UI. The sky and landscape does look familiar, however. A shame we don't have a playable version of this. And thanks to Christopher Sundberg, we also know what the earliest logo of the game looked like, and that the initial design document was created around July 2002. We can also see that Just Cause was just a working title at the time. Among the game's landscape textures, we can find an early map of the game. You can clearly see it already looks similar, but some land masses were later disconnected, made bigger, and spaces between stuff got smaller. We can find another early map, this height map looking one, that appears to be somewhat in between the previous one and the final map's design. We're staying in the textures folder for a little longer, because here we can also find overlay textures for binoculars. There's actually still code for them in the game, and here is what they look like brought back. Now it is kind of blurry here because it wasn't finished, but you can even zoom in and out. And at this point, I quickly have to give credits to the two people that helped me with this video, Tony and Kabuto. Tony made the Just Cause 1 multiplayer mod that gives me a bunch of tools and lets me spawn in stuff, and Kabuto for digging through the game's code, working on new tools, and converting most of the models I'm showing. He's also working on an enhanced version of Just Cause 1, so join the Just Cause Discord if you want to see updates on that. But he didn't just make the binoculars work, he also found references to a night vision mode, but nothing about it seems to have survived in the files. Another unused action is crouching, which you can see here. The debug free fly camera is still in the game as well, and speaking of debug stuff, someone on YouTube showcased a build with the debug menu in it. It looks pretty much like it did up until Just Cause 3, and lets you do all kind of cool stuff. But sadly, we don't currently have this version of the game. Give that video a watch if you want to see more of that. The rest of the unused actions are on screen here. You know the one thing I love more than almost anything else? Unused and beta vehicles. But before you get to those, how about something you didn't even know is a vehicle? The missiles you have to chase and shoot down in the final mission, taking out the garbage, are actually real, usable vehicles. Once spawned in, you can just enter them and have at it. They control kind of sluggish and need a long runway to take off. The collision is also kind of weird, and a lot taller than the model itself, presumably to make them easier to hit. The name shows up as unnamed plane, and on the side it says, oh my god, this cannot be real. But it also says with love from Sanas through the launch site. That's cute. There are in fact 4 rockets in the files. Rocket, Rocket A, Rocket B and Rocket C. Rocket A, B and C, I assume, are the ones you have to chase down in the mission. But Rocket is interesting. It also has files for the Rage Johnston F6 Comet, the plane to chase them with. If I'd have to guess, they based the missile on this plane and then edited it from there. Or maybe they had some special need for those models to be loaded in while making the mission. Who knows? Now to the unused vehicles. There are 2 completely unused air vehicles that barely anyone has ever even seen. The first one is the Sterling STL-3 Octavio, a fancy looking plane with long wings and a propeller in the back. This plane even showed up in a promo image, but was removed from the game for seemingly no reason. There's actually a Prima game guide that mentions it and describes it as having a top speed of 300, low armor and great handling. The second unused vehicle is the Fukada MH Ronin. It too is mentioned in the Prima game guide and is said to have a top speed of 235, decent handling and a little more armor than the Octavio. It also comes with a minigun. The guide lists both these aircraft as rare and, I guess, seeing how it took almost 15 years for anyone to find and use them, the guide also claims that it appears in the Guadalicano Choo Choo mission, which it obviously doesn't. Looks like Dr. Kleiner was meant to use it instead of a gyrocopter. Seeing how the Fukada fully works, I don't see why they changed this, but I stopped questioning game developers a long time ago. So let's just move on. The third and final unused vehicle is a big truck, called the Mossberg Cross Country Loader. Like the other 2, it's fully functional and there's nothing that seems to be wrong with it. Maybe they wanted to have a working trailer for it, but couldn't get it to work. But that's the only thing I can really think of for not including it. He also got beta versions of some existing vehicles. A beta version of the Huerta Mesa Jeep, and an ambulance version of the Huerta PA-51 Aztec helicopter. Both of these remain as complete vehicles in the game files, but some components are from an earlier version of the game, and simply crash the game when loading them in. The only parts that remain compatible are the models and textures. The early Huerta Mesa is longer, but also narrower than the final version. The model also has less detail compared to the finished version. The interior is different too. The finished version has a separated trunk and of course the iconic blue denim texture that you can see in every vehicle. Seriously, go look for it. You'll never be able to unsee it now. The beta version has a combined interior, and you can actually still see similarities, the beta textures even appearing higher resolution in some areas. The engine texture on the other hand looks better on the finished version, because it is stretched less and only appears under parts that actually detach. The ambulance Aztec helicopter resembles the final version much more closely, with only minor changes like the interior and lower detail windows. The black parts you can see around the ambulance decals would not be visible in the game, by the way. Those parts are actually just transparent. There are also slightly earlier versions of the Shimizu Tumbleweed, the Taxi and the Rossi Coral, but those only have minor model and texture changes. You know the one thing that I actually love more than anything else? Developer areas. There are 3 that are of note: Vehicle Jump Test, Combat Sim Area and Shooting Range. Vehicle Jump Area probably was the most fun to play around in, since you have a bunch of Hot Wheels looking ramps of varying sizes. Now as you can see, everything just floats in the air. There used to be a temporary test island here, but those have all been removed. Apart from the ramps, there is also a rock and a vehicle rack. Exciting stuff. Secondly, we have the Combat Simulation Area, which has this village with a bunch of houses. Once the area loads in, we also get this 0 out of 15 kills message on the right side of the screen. There would have probably been a bunch of hostile NPCs here that we had to defeat, and once you defeat them all, I assume the area would just reload with different NPCs and spawns. The last one is the Shooting Range, which was used to test guns. Looks like range, accuracy and bullet spread was tested here, though I assume they did have some targets to shoot at some point. For those wondering, this little sign here just says placeholder. But we're not done with unused locations just yet. There is also a location file called SI Safe House 2, an early version of the hideout where you spawn after the intro mission. I loaded it in alongside the final version, so you can see how it differs from it. You can see a different layout for the fences, indicating the terrain here used to be different as well. We also got this big tent in the way, and these hay bales on little carts. Some props like this house and the silo appear in almost the same place as the final version, but we can see them clip into each other. Here's a fun fact: the game's exe seems to have test code in it that refers to Casa de los Avalanches. And to find their home, all we need to do is teleport to these coordinates, which will bring us to this little agency dock right here. There is nothing special here though. And finally, there are developer comments left in some game files. They appear mostly in the settings files, which come in a packed format most of the time, usually .bin. But some of them have the raw version left in as well, that not only reveal full variable names, which helps with modding, but also some genuinely useful descriptions that would have been helpful for Avalanche developers to quickly read up on what the things in here do. Some of them stand out more than others, but just being able to read through this stuff is really cool. So thanks to whoever left these in here. And that would be everything we found so far. If you're interested in Just Cause 1 modding yourself, then join us in the Just Cause Discord to be notified when Just Cause 1 Enhanced releases, which adds modding support. Apart from that, as usual, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.